So, our assignment today is to read from the first chapter of John's Gospel. Towards the end of the chapter, about verse 43, we find an incident that uh, to understand and to delve into, it takes a little bit of background. Now, when I was young, the first Bible class I ever took was called Life and Times of Jesus. And essentially, we read through the Gospels in an ancient book called A Harmony of the Gospels. There are many, many, many harmonies written, and this was probably the oldest one, and it had fossils on it. Now, the way we went through the Gospels was as prescribed in the book, and as we went through, the instructor essentially preached from the verses as they spoke to him. And this was okay, but it didn't help me a great deal to come to grips with what the scriptures were really saying. Some years ago, or I should say some years after I graduated, uh, I was guided towards taking further classes. And the first one I took was through the University of British Columbia. And it was a 4 hour class on Thursday evenings, and it was the Bible as literature. Now, I found this tremendously helpful because it got me to beginning to help to understand how there were different genres of literature, which was not something that was shown to me in my first class. It helped me understand the different reasons for the gospel accounts, because there are four of them. And it also just forced me to focus on the zeitgeist of the situations that I was reading about. Here we're going to read about Jesus calling one of his disciples and the repercussions of that. And we need to understand that Jesus is in the company of John the Baptizer, for example. He's out in the desert. He's probably, in fact, almost definitely just been to the Feast of Tabernacles. He has traveled then to the east, past Jericho, out to the Jordan River, presented himself for baptism. And John, the one who was preparing the way for the Lord in the wilderness, has now given the elbow to several of his disciples and said, "You go over there. This is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." And so we're breaking into a story which, unless you understand the context and the moment, doesn't make as much sense. I've heard, or I should say, I've read stories about Jesus calling his disciples from the nets, for example. Now, in reality, Jesus calls his disciples from the nets halfway through his ministry. And if you don't understand that, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But here in John's gospel, you understand where he first makes the acquaintance of his disciples and where he first gets to interact with them. And he's beginning to call his team of followers. Now, this isn't entirely true of Jesus. You're only as good as the team you play on. Jesus was perfect all by himself. But for the rest of us to understand teamwork is important. I know this morning before I got back into using Zoom, I called Jerry to make sure that I was on track and understood how we could interact. I called Mark to get some help. I called Gary Schultz to get some help, and he in turn contacted Larry to make sure we had some help. So if this service happens to work today without too big a disaster, it's because there's a team of 4 or 5 of us behind this logo of the cross and the globe. And anything that really is accomplished in human terms is accomplished by a team. Go Oilers, by the way, 10 in a row. Just to throw that in, I'll have to pay for that later, of course, because I live with a Flames fan, but we all have our burdens to bear. Now, 10 in a row, and they started the team They started the year as not a very strong team, I suppose, and they were shaky. And now they've had a run at 9 undefeated. And now they started another run with 10 undefeated. And the team is cooking. Jesus is calling a team here. And he is calling together what we would universally call the body of Christ. And this is what you're witnessing in this particular moment. So let's take a look at the scripture. And let's understand that the lesson that jumps out from this little section of scripture is encapsulated in the words of Philip to Nathanael. Check this out. Check this out, dude. John chapter 1, verses 43 through 51. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said, follow me. Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was there from the town of Bethsaida. Now, I'm going to read this off of a note here because I can't read it on the screen. Okay. Philip found Nathanael and told him, we have found the one Moses spoke about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Nazareth? Can anything good come from there? Nathanael asked. Come and see, said Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, here truly is an Israelite, in whom there is no deceit. How do you know me? Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, I saw you while you were still under the fig tree, before Philip called you. Then Nathanael declared, Rabbi, you're the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus said, you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? Oh, you'll see greater things than that. He then added, verily, truly, I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Now, as we come to this particular section, we notice that Jesus is inviting one individual. He's approaching him and he's inviting him, which the first thing that speaks to me is this. Jesus knows what he's doing. He's the one doing the seeking and the calling, and his timing is perfect. You'll notice that he has decided to leave for Galilee. You know, he knows where he's going. He's going to a wedding. They don't know where he's going. He knows what he's doing. He's going to introduce them to himself with a quiet miracle just for them, the turning water into wine. He's going to show them that he is first and foremost a person connected with reality, extended family, celebration. But also the subtle message is going to jump out at them that this is an individual who can take the ordinary and turn it into extraordinary. This is a person who works miracles, but he works miracles for the joy and the benefit of others, not to impress the people that he can throw lightning bolts and he can thunder. And so he, with his plan and with his purpose in mind, finds Philip and says to him simply, follow me. I don't believe that that's all he said. This is a summation of what he said. But the summation communicates that it's a pretty clear and blunt request. It's a pretty direct offer. And whatever the specifics of the conversation, follow me. I'm leaving in a couple of hours. Follow me. Get your belongings together. It's sort of a motivation that comes to Philip, and he responds. Now he's from the town of Bethsaida, and he is there with some motivation in his life. He's taken time off from work. He's left his family behind. He's journeyed to Jerusalem. He's obviously a devout Jew, and he's journeying with a bunch of other small business people that he associates with, and some individuals who are related to each other. And Jesus anticipates that he will share the word that he's given with with Philip's associates, his friends, his relatives, and his business partners. So clearly, Jesus is at work. He's choosing the time and the place, and he's doing something very strategic with this. But we also note that Philip then goes and finds Nathanael. And he says, well, we found the one Moses wrote about in the law and about whom the prophets also wrote. He's Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Now, this is a fairly predictable result. Now, remember, these guys are there in the company of John, and John sounds very much like Elijah in the school of the prophets. This is an open air. Uh, Maybe it's right to say ragtag. These are people who've been to Jerusalem. They've been to the Feast of Tabernacles. They've journeyed down to the river. They don't have to rush home. The crops are in. They can take time now to pursue their passion. And again, this is important to understand the zeitgeist of the time. Uh, the passion is, how do we get the Romans out of here? You know, they're the sort of the Ukrainians of their time. How do we get the Russians out of here? How do we resist? Well, their form of resistance was looking for the Messiah. Everybody was anxious and anticipating a messianic figure coming from somewhere. But of course, they anticipated somebody who would boot the Romans out. They didn't anticipate somebody would come and actually treat the Romans nicely, heal their children, show respect and deference to the law. The Romans didn't have much against Jesus. You know, when it came time to crucify him, the Roman governor was caught between a rock and a hard place. And he's the one who, you might say, wimped out and washed his hands. But the reality was, if he offended the Jews, well, there'd be riots, and if there were riots, then Rome would come down on his head, and hard. And so he felt, that very famous expression where Jesus talks with him about the realities of the situation, and almost in exasperation, Pilate says, what is truth? What is truth? I don't think he's saying philosophically what is truth, and he's saying simply, what is the truth of this situation? What am I supposed to do? Here I am stuck between you, whom your own people reject you. I'm trying to deal with the reality that your own people want you crucified, and if I don't crucify you, they'll riot, and Rome will crucify me. This sort of situation. And so this is the time and the place, and the Jews are on the edge of their nerves, and they're looking for somebody to be a champion. These guys are pretty much in the same way, looking for somebody to be a champion, and they're not quite as militant, perhaps, as the zealots are. But remember, towards the end of the ministry, it's one of the disciples, Peter, who chops off the ear of somebody who comes to arrest Jesus. These are not quiet individuals. They are the sons of thunder, we are told. And so here they are, with their own prejudices, their own ideas, their own aspirations. And Jesus gently approaches them in this time and in this place. And the first one he approaches is Philip. He says, "Follow me." And Philip goes and tells Nathanael, I think we found the man. And he doesn't say that just because he's had a conversation. He says this because John the Baptizer told him a few hours before, you got to go over and see him. This guy is going to shake the world. He's the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And all these details come crushing in now to this particular moment of story. And now it says, Nathaniel, who's been approached by Philip, says, "Nazareth, can anything good come from there?" Nathaniel asked. Now, we've come all the way down to Jerusalem, which is the intellectual and the emotional and the spiritual capital of our nation. We've just come all the way to the south. We walked 3 days to get here. And you're telling me now that the answer to our prayers is coming from north of where we live? We came down from Bethsaida, from Capernaum, this area, and Nazareth is to the north of that. In fact, Nazareth is so far north, we don't even really count it as being in the nation of Israel. It's sort of on the border. The people up there are half Gentile as far as we're concerned. It's on a trade route. It's just not really us. Nazareth, can anything good come from there? We've heard of Bethlehem. Of course, they don't know Jesus was born there. We've heard of Jerusalem. Uh, we even heard of Samaria, but not Nazareth. This is crazy. Well, you know, what is the response? Well, come and see, said Philip. You're going to have to check this out for yourself. Um, Typically, for us human beings, the first responses we have to a situation are based on our prejudices. We're critical of new things. I remember the dean of students saying when I was a student once, first responses are always carnal, meaning of the flesh, of the prejudices, of our own personal experience. This is just the way we are. We push back. We defend what we know, and we defend what we like. But here, well, okay, Philip, you're my friend. You're my brother in arms. We've traveled together. We share the same interest and passion, and you're challenging me. Come and see. And of course, in saying this, Philip is also um, having to admit, I can't convince you. I can't talk you into this. But the reality is, you've got to come to it and experience it. You've got to be open enough to experience this for yourself. Now, Jesus clearly finds the way in through Philip, and Philip is moved by his invitation, or his imperative, follow me. And well, we're leaving. We got to leave anyway, so I'm going to go and lean on Nathaniel. Come, but he's got to see for himself. He's got to experience for himself, and there's a measure of open-mindedness that has to be there. Typically, we aren't open-minded. We lock into positions, and I mean, I confess, I'm it's an effort, but I try to keep an open mind about so many things. Uh, if you're a bit of a news junkie, as some of us are, you can get it from slanted one way or slanted the other. Um, as an Albertan, and I borrowed some money against my house so that I could reduce taxes, start an RRSP, and I invested in a few oil companies, and they pay dividend stocks. So I'm kind of interested in oil. And by extension, I think we're going to need oil at least for the next decade. Right now, battery-driven cars aren't doing quite as well as they could or should. And it's going to be at least a decade before we see a drop-off in the demand for oil. So, of course, I'm emotionally vested in the Trans Mountain Pipeline. We have to sell so much oil into the United States because we can't sell it elsewhere. We can't transport it. And the U.S. says, well, who else are you going to sell it to? So give us a 25, 30% discount, and then we'll take your oil. So Trans Mountain Pipeline, I've been following that for a while, as have most Albertans probably. We know that there are difficulties with it. I read the other day that there was the last section, they need to re-engineer it, and it said it's going to take 2 years for them to approve it. I thought, how can you drag things out for 2 years? Whole bunch of engineers. But anyway, here a few weeks later, I read yesterday that they've approved it. They're pushing it through. We still might get oil through that pipeline sometime in 2024. And so, on behalf of all those who own dividend-paying stocks in an oil company, we say hallelujah. And on behalf of all Albertans, we say, Godspeed that. If I'm going to drive an electric car, well, maybe it'll be in 10 or 15 years. I don't mind doing that. I've driven electric golf carts, and they're not that bad. But you know what I'm saying. And in the same way, depending on which news source you get, you come to it with prejudices and ideas. Somebody posits one thing, and you're okay. But it's possible to walk and chew gum at the same time. It's possible to say, okay, hear what you're saying, but I'd like to hear a little bit more. I'd like to hear where this is going, what this will mean. I'd like to see the impact in 5 or 10 years. I like to know this. This is a highly personal journey that each of us has to go on. And if you just block yourself to other points of view, or at least hearing what other people are saying, then you block information and you block the possibility that, well, maybe there's more to this. Again, oil. I hear, and of course, there's plenty of reasons to be, uh, well, how can I put it tactfully? Joe Biden's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Let's put it that way. And there are a lot of reasons why you look very, very askance at his leadership. But one trope that I hear is that he just ruined oil and all of that. And yeah, did a number of things. First thing he did was cancel a pipeline that should have gone through. Next thing he did was cancel fracking, things like that. On the other hand, it is true that oil production has never been higher than it is right now. And I don't know quite how, but it is a fact that never before has this much oil been pumped by the U.S. And yet you hear constant criticism, and there's plenty of things to criticize. But statistically, never before have we pumped this much oil in the United States and in Canada. So, okay, two things can be true. So, Philip, is he the Messiah? Well, maybe, maybe not. You've got to come and see for yourself. You've got to be open minded enough to realize that two things can be true. He can be from Nazareth, and who the heck comes out of Nazareth? But he could also be the Messiah. Okay, two things can be true. Okay, uh, Justin Trudeau can be a total fill in the blank. But he also done one good thing for Alberta, which is we got to get the Trans Mountain Pipeline built. Those two things can be true. Doesn't mean to say I'm going to throw my arms around him and saying you're just the greatest thing since sliced bread. But like a broken clock, maybe you're right twice today. Okay? Two things can be true. And for Philip, it's going to be a highly personal confrontation, interaction with Jesus. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said, well, here comes an Israelite in whom is no deceit. He's not implying that he's a shyster, but he's saying, here is an Israelite, okay, who is, not a deceitful person. He's not somebody who is, he's a plain speaker. He's a straight ahead person. He accepts the realities of new things. He is a true Israelite. There's nothing false in him. He's not trying to defend a point of view or push an agenda. He's just looking. He's taken the invitation to come and see. He's seeing, and he now is confronting in a plain spoken way the reality that is in front of him. And so, okay. And Jesus says this to him. And understandably, Nathaniel, who's a plain spoken guy and pretty blunt, and he said, well, how do you know me? Nathaniel asked. And Jesus says, well, I saw while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you. Now, this just doesn't mean to say that I saw you sitting under a tree. There will be commentators who will point out that this is sort of a way of explaining that he saw him in prayer. In other words, if you saw somebody on their lunch break and they were, well, a couple of months ago, I saw a project that involved a whole bunch of trucks coming by and front end loader, just loading them up with dirt and garbage that had to be removed from a building site. And I was just standing there watching it happen. And one of the truckers had gone, dumped his load, and come back. And he got out of his truck and he threw down a piece of fabric on the ground. And before I knew it, before I realized it, he was on his knees praying. And that obviously, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer myself, but even I could see he must be Muslim. And he was praying in the traditional manner. And so the Jews had ways in which they prayed in traditional manners. Daniel prayed 3 times a day and he looked towards Jerusalem. Doesn't mean to say you and I have to, but at that time, that was his fashion, that was his style. Nathaniel was sitting under a fig tree. And just as if you saw one of your fellow workers eating their sandwich at lunchtime and looking at a fairly thick book with a black leather cover, you kind of suspect it was a Bible. And you would be correct in assuming that they were a person of some devotion and some interest. Now, that's all you personally might discern. Maybe they were studying it so that they could refute it. But in this context, Jesus knows that Nathaniel didn't quit his job for a couple of weeks, come all the way down to listen to this wild prophet, John, and sit there under a fig tree, clearly praying in a way that was common and public, reasonably public at the time. And Jesus knew instinctively, and also had that reinforced by his, his insight as God in the flesh. This Nathaniel was a devout individual who would respond to Philip's invitation in a blunt but open way. And so this is what he says, how do you know me? Clear question. Answer, I saw you under the fig tree. I saw you in prayer. I saw you just contemplating what you'd heard from John a few hours before. At which point, of course, Nathaniel responds. Nathaniel declared, Rabbi, you're the Son of God. You're the King of Israel. Now, that's the conclusion he comes to quickly. And I'm sure there's more conversation that surround this, but this is the conclusion of the interaction. Doesn't mean to say there wasn't more discussion or a few other questions. There wasn't mean to say, well, oh, you're the same one that John spoke about yesterday. I heard about your baptism. I heard about the dove. I heard about the voice and things like that. At this particular point, he declares, you're the Son of God. You're the King of Israel. You're the man. And he comes to that conclusion as a response to the challenge that Philip has offered. You got to come and see for yourself, but you're going to like what you see. At this particular point, it's interesting how Jesus responds. It says, you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree, you'll see greater things than that. Here we're seeing an interactions that taking place. We're seeing Jesus inviting Philip. And of course, something then happens with Philip. He's not just invited to follow, but he's invited to participate, isn't he? Maybe a subtle invitation, but he can't help himself. He's going to share this with others. So the work of Jesus is done with Philip, and yet it's also done through Philip. And now we see Nathaniel roped in, and we see him influenced and added to this body of action, this team energy that's taking place. And Jesus saying in response to Nathaniel, if you're impressed with the fact that I saw you in prayer, okay, you're going to see more than that. Truly, I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Now, there are probably other references, but the one that springs to mind here is what? The story of Joseph. A story of Joseph who is alone, fleeing for his life, he feels uh, alienated from his own family. His dad's mad at him. His brother wants to kill him. He's running away to Syria, and he puts his head on a stone to sleep in that place. And in his dream, he sees Jacob, I beg your pardon, Jacob's ladder. Okay, if I said Joseph, I was wrong. Jacob's ladder. He sees the ladder, and he sees angels ascending and descending, moving between heaven and earth. And he realizes in that moment that God is active in that time and place. And this is what Jesus is saying to Nathanael. He said, you know, if you're impressed with the fact that I just saw you in prayer, well, you're going to be even more impressed and more motivated, more moved when you see me in action. You're going to see the hand of God at work. You're going to see the move of God in this time and place. And you're going to see me clearly as the Son of Man. Now, this reference is taken directly from Daniel, of course, where Daniel looks into heaven and he sees God's servant, the Son of Man, who will be doing God's work on the earth. And this is a deliberate title which Jesus chooses for himself. I know some years ago there was a rather famous commentator and critic by the name of Harper who would write for, I think it was the Star, the Toronto Star, one of the national papers at the time. And I'm going back 35, 40 years. And I never forget how in an interview that I saw him speaking, he referred to the fact that Jesus was a man. And obviously his favorite title for himself was the Son of Man, showing that he just wanted to be represented as a man. Now that was so disingenuous to me because Jesus' favorite title for himself, Son of Man, was a direct reference to Daniel's vision of the heavens. That however you perceive the Son of Man, he clearly came from heaven and he was clearly comfortable accepting worship as God in the context of all the stories where the Son of Man allows people to worship him. So the idea that Jesus I just want to be known as a regular guy. No, yeah, from the very beginning, he announces to his disciples, I am the Son of Man, capital S, capital M. I am the servant of the Most High God, the one that was prophesied to come throughout the book of Daniel. So that's what you've got to wrap your mind around here, Nathaniel, both you and Philip. And you're going to see evidence of this in my ministry, in my work. And you're going to grow into this as you journey with me. So this is exactly what we see unfolding now within this particular story. We see uh, we see Jesus inviting them. Okay, and I'm going to summarize it this way: calling them into a dynamic relationship, and this dynamic relationship is a long journey. He doesn't exactly say bluntly, "Don't think it's plain sailing from here on." Okay, but he says this is just the start. You've come, you've witnessed, you've accepted, but you don't know where this is going to lead. It's not as plain and simple as saying, oh, well, you saw me under the fig tree, that's it. And no, this is a long journey. You're going to see the angels ascending and descending. In other words, you're going to see God's workers on this long journey that you've begun with me. The good news that comes out of this is there's a final destination, which Jesus emphasizes quite often. There's an outcome, there's a reward, there's a conclusion to all of this. But at the start of the journey, you do not know where this journey is going to lead you. You do not know the challenges. You do not know the conclusion of this physical life, how it will come to you. I'm reminded of the interchange between the disciples where uh, Jesus says to Peter, here, you're the man. You exert your influence and your authority. You rejoice in your strength. You wag your sword around. The time will come when they will take you, and you will not be able to control what happens to you, and you will be the victim of harsh and cruel punishment at the hands of your opponents. At which point, if you recall the story, Peter turns to John, who is Jesus' little brother. John is his closest and dearest disciple, not really, but the one who leans on Jesus' shoulder at the Last Supper. And Peter, perhaps with a little pique, says, "Well, what about him? What's his future? You're telling me I'm going to have a tough time. How's it going to be for him?" And Jesus responds, "It's irrelevant. You know, well, what is it? What is it? What is it to you? You're on a personal journey with me. You're going to experience a life with me, and that life, just like Philip, is going to cause you to travel with me, work with me, but also allow me to work through you." Just as this little exchange that has taken place, I talked to Philip, and Philip suddenly talks to his associate, Nathaniel. And of course, some of the others then talk to each other. They talk to their brothers, and the brothers join very quickly. We know the start of the journey, and we know the final destination. It's eternity. Jesus emphasizes that there's a reward for these things. Enter into the joy of your Lord, the joy of your Master. He describes it in different ways: 2 cities, 5 cities, 10 cities, which is a way of saying that they're measures of appreciation, measures of reward that you will feel. Okay, but you don't know all that the intermediate steps will be. I'm reminded of the old classic song, when somebody loves you, it's no good unless they love you all the way. Happy to be near you when you need someone to cheer you all the way. Well, there's a schmaltzy romantic song, but the words invoke the same thoughts when it comes to Jesus. Um, if you say you love him and you're devoted to him, my disciples, then, you're going to have to journey with him. And that journey can be kind of rocky in places. And like Philip, okay, like Nathaniel, you are both on a journey, but you're also asked to contribute to the journey. I was thinking of this morning, and I thought of the old British song anyway. Um, this is a bicycle made for two, and you're going to have to pedal. Uh, you know, uh, I'll embarrass myself by mentioning this. I think it was featured in Space Odyssey 2001, but the song the computer sang, "Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer due." I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. It won't be a stylish marriage. We can't afford a carriage, but you'll look sweet upon the seat of a bicycle made for two. All right. Now, I'm sure no bride envisions that, but if you grew up in a bicycle culture, which I did, and you know that there are twin bikes, and the person at the back has to pedal, just like the person at the front. The person at the front gets to steer. It doesn't sound necessarily very democratic. Only one person can steer, but you both got to pedal. Uh, there are schoolboy versions of that song. Uh, you know, if you grew up in England, the schoolboy version was "Daisy, Daisy, give me, the cuppers are after you." If they catch you, they give you a month or two. Uh, uh, you know, and the conclusion of the song was ring your bell and pedal like hell on a bicycle made for two. You don't have to know anything about that song, but the point is, if you're in trouble and the police are after you, you got to pedal, and both of you need to pedal. So both Philip and Nathaniel are invited initially on a journey, but very quickly Philip's journey involves contributing, and Nathaniel very quickly his journey involves contributing. And for all of us, it's the same as getting on a bicycle made for two. Jesus may be, or definitely has the handlebars, but you also got to pedal. And you, in this, you take joy in your calling. You also participate in the work of the calling. You understand that this is something that is all encompassing. I referenced this here a few weeks back, but I know my wife was unearthing in some boxes and found a poem that was her dad's favorite poem. So I actually got it made at Christmas time on a plaque because I thought it was something she'd like to enjoy with her son. Her daughter was home for Christmas from Texas, and this was her dad's poem, and it came from his particular tradition. It was obviously strongly influenced by the ethos of the Mennonite culture, which said you're required to be a good neighbor. And that's not just so that you can have better relationships with your neighbors, but also it shows them who you represent in your mind, in your heart, in your example, in your life. I am my neighbor's Bible. And so I got to put on a plaque, and she was able to share it with her son. Uh, I thought it was a very meaningful poem, and I thought it was a tribute to her dad. You can buy something romantic for your wife anytime you go to Costco. You can find a kayak or a bike rack or something like that. But I thought this was something that was relevant to history and to her children, who were his grandchildren, and so this speaks volumes when you think about it. Okay, you are the son of God by adoption, but you're also the channel through which God will show to the world what He is like, what His Son Jesus is like, and by extension, what you reflect in your life, which was exactly the experience that Philip and Nathaniel are having in this little pericope, this little excerpt from the book of John. As you think about this, I invite you to think about the coming week. I think, and I invite you to meditate on the interactions that you have, to rejoice in the influence that you have on your children, your grandchildren, your neighbors, your friends, to realize that Jesus is at work, not just for you and with you and in you, but through you as well. It shapes the way that we perceive our congregation. You know, and I know one or two of you are thinking very hard about the Love Avenue, how we reach out and how we influence and reflect into the community around us. And that is both a challenge and an opportunity and something that we aspire to. But it's also encouraging to see ourselves in a better position to do that. Today, we're a closed-lit community through Zoom, but typically we're a little more open, streaming through YouTube and reaching out through Facebook and being known a little bit more. And we like that to multiply and continue. We like that to be the influence that we have on others. And so meditate today on this little confrontation, this little interaction that takes place between Jesus and Philip and Nathaniel. Link it to the knock-on effect that it has as they tell two friends who tell two friends. And very quickly, there's a community of it's about 10 of them at least, who are making their way north to get a really solid start on their journey with Jesus. And it's a very pleasant start. He's going to take them to a wedding, and he's going to turn water into wine. But it's also a long journey. It's a long journey that I liken to you mounting the bicycle with Jesus holding the handlebars and guiding the machine, but you also participating in pedaling, being in sync, being in rhythm with the one who has called you into everlasting life with him. So I hope this little story that we've been directed to share together today is both encouraging and also clarifying for you as to what you have entered into and what you are participating in. I wish you the best this coming week for your journey with Jesus, and perhaps we'll talk a little bit about that at the close of our service today as we share fellowship and time together. But at this moment, let's just close the sermon with prayer. Our Father in heaven, we are grateful that, first of all, that just like you've called Philip, you've called us. You found us at the vulnerable moments in our lives when we are open and ready to think a little further. We were able to see past our prejudices and our preconceived ideas and just see a breadth or a little more of the breadth of the vision that you've offered us. We ask your blessing as we not only continue our personal journeys with you, but also as we find ways to be guided by you into interacting and know the joy of sharing our faith with others. It's a subtle thing, but it's a real challenge you've placed before us. So we're grateful for that today, and we ask for both for our persons, for our congregation, for our team, which is the body of Jesus that meets every Sunday morning at Red Willow. We ask your guidance and your participation and your inspiration as we seek to fulfill your mandate to us, which is to shine the light into this dark world of your kingdom. We thank you. We ask your blessing, your encouragement, your protection for this coming week. We ask it in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.